Welcome to Know Your BC Limit, Play Within It. Hey, I'm Eric, and so with BC being the cloud and Microsoft controlling the environments, there are rules. There are limitations, there are restrictions, there are a lot of things that try to keep us from blowing up the cloud, which in most cases probably is a good idea because some folks are creative, but I quite often I find myself going back to the same web page on learn.microsoft.com to help answer all sorts of questions. So I thought I will bring you along to that webpage and we can explore it together because it's actually quite an interesting page. And there's a link below to this. Hopefully, there's a link below to this page. But it's called Operational Limits for Business Central Online. Where you can say that this basically describes how the server that we're connecting to is configured. If you're on-prem, you can configure your server to whatever limitations you'd like. But what's in this document are the limitations Microsoft has decided on for the cloud. So these are for everyone. And whatever we do, this is the playing field. This is what we need to stay within. And I just printed it out to PDF because then it was nicer to read. But let's run through it and just there's a couple of interesting things here, and then I want to show you something at the end about how this document actually lives, because that's also quite interesting. So there's different sections. The first section says client connection limit, and there's actually let's start with one I'm not totally sure about. 10 minutes reconnect period, the time during which a client can reconnect to the service after being disconnected. Well, I kind of feel like you can always reconnect because most cases you're forced to going through the new session thing again. But maybe there's a difference between under 10 minutes or over 10 minutes. I'm not sure what actual real life impact this one has. Then there's something about data handling. Max items in the object graph. Maximum number of objects to serialize and deserialize, 10,000. If you're connecting to the Microsoft Graph, this might have an impact. I haven't seen this in real life so far. The next one I have seen though. So the maximum upload and download size of anything is 350 megabytes. So if you're producing a very, very big PDF report of all your value entries or something like that, that one cannot be bigger than 350 megabyte. If you're creating a God forbid a config package, that's the physical size. If you want to upload something, that's the physical size. Other than that, you have to small promo here for my tool BCCL that will chop stuff off, and so you can upload gigabytes and download gigabytes if you want to. But anyway, single bulk upload download size is 350 megabytes. Then another one that you might run into when you're AL programming, if you're doing reads and operations out of a stream, you're limited to a megabyte at a time. So if you need to read something out of a whatever it is, let's say you uploaded the 350 megabytes, well, you cannot read the entire thing into a memory stocker. You have to do multiple reads and then write it into whatever you wanted. So read, stream, read text, or read will not go above 1,000 characters, but it will just say, okay, then there's more data, so you can just keep reading. Let's continue. Database limits. So these are basically timeouts. There are different types of timeouts. So there's a search timeout, 10 seconds. And you might have seen that if you have a lot of columns and you try to do a cross, so that the search function up in the upper left corner of a list box, the multi-column search, then if you have too many columns, it doesn't work, because then you're hitting the timeout. If you have a SQL command that runs more than 30 minutes, then it's aborted as a timeout. SQL connection idle timeout, I don't think that you will actually see that doing AL stuff. So that doesn't really have any impact. Connection timeout, the time to wait for the service to connect to the database, 1.5 minutes. Again, not something that will have any impact on you and me. That's all how Microsoft connects to the database. And the last one here is the long-running SQL query threshold. The only thing that does is that if you have SQL commands, if your AL produces SQL commands, and those SQL commands run for more than a second, it will produce a telemetry saying, hey, this thing ran for longer than a second. And then you can do statistics on that, and you can find, oh, we got some slow operations here. Let's see what we can do about them. The next one is the one I seem to run into a lot: asynchronous task limits. So the first one is saying that if you start something in a background session, so start session command, it will never run for more than 8 hours. That's kind of annoying sometimes if you're doing super big cost adjustments, or in our case we have an app, eFolks app, called the Cloud Replicator, and you gotta replicate tons of data to the initial operation. We have to limit that. We need to stay within the 8 hours, because if you pass 8 hours, the session is just killed. And speaking of background sessions, so start session from AL, there's a maximum of 10 that will run at the same time. You can queue up to 100, so you can say start session 100 times, but only 10 of them will actually run. The others will just sit and wait until there's one of the 10 slots available. Child session max concurrency, the maximum number of child session that can run concurrency per parent session. So if you call something that will produce child sessions, you'll never get more than 5 running from the same parent. So same principle happens. I'm actually not quite sure how this and this one plays together, because I know I can start 10 jobs that will run at the same time with start session. So actually this one is interesting from that perspective. Again, with child sessions, you have a maximum of 100 sessions queued up waiting to start. Here's another one: maximum concurrent running scheduled task. So there is a difference between a background session and a scheduled task. A background session, you start with start session. A scheduled task is you start with the task scheduler, and that is what is running the job queue. So now you see here that there's only 3 jobs that can run at the same time. So if you have a ton of job queue things, you might actually run out of job queue time, especially if you have multiple companies. There are certain things that sometimes almost are spamming the job queue with update a headline and update telemetry, and so there's tons of tasks that may only run for a fraction of a second, but they are there and they're filling up all the time. Some apps runs license checks as a scheduled task, and so that also takes up some of this. So I've seen customers with lots of companies that a job was supposed to start in the job queue and it just never started. What you can do, there's actually a trick to get around this, is that you can, from a scheduled task, you can run a background session. So you can actually use the scheduled task just to start your background session, and thereby you can tap into the 10 instead of being limited to the 3. So if you have a customer with a, there's pressure on the job queue and stuff are not running at the time because there's none of the 3 available, you might look into changing some of the long-running jobs to actually just the job will start and then it will start a session instead. Maximum session recursion depth. So 14. I have never hit that limit. So you have a session that starts a session that starts a session that starts a session, and at depth 14 it says that's it. Never been an issue. Of course, this is also created to prevent, endless loops of stuff that are restarting itself or something like that. Page background task default timeout. The default amount of time that a page background task can run before being cancelled. So a page background task is, I use it in the SharePoint Connector app. So whenever you navigate to a record, the SharePoint Connector app fact box will start a page background task that will then query SharePoint for all the files that belongs to wherever you are, and when that comes back, the fact box is updated. So there's no UI waiting for the fact box and stuff like that. It's all sent to the page background task, and I got 2 minutes to query SharePoint and get my stuff. Then we have a max timeout, the maximum amount of time that a page background task can run before being cancelled. The default and a maximum, so we can specify, I think there's a parameter to specify the timeout. Okay, on to reports. Time is flying. Default max document, the maximum number of documents that can be merged in a report using a word layout. Users can override this setting on a report basis from the report request page. If we see the report will be cancelled. 200 max documents in a Word document. If see the cancel, 500. Default max execution timeout, and notice that this one is different from the background task. So the background task will run for 8 hours. A report will run for 6 hours, and can be default max and max. So we can specify up to 12 hours if we want to. A data set produced by a report cannot be more than 500,000. The default max, and then you can go in and change it up to 1 million records. Queries. So if you have a query, if it's not completed within 30 minutes, it's done, and a query will never give you more than 1 million records. Okay, now some other limits. And this one is new. So company limits. You cannot have more than 300 companies in one environment. And we can see that this will take effect from now. And there's been a lot of chatter about this one. I think, and this is, I think the reason for this is to upgrade. The problem with the company is that, there's a full set of tables for each company, but whenever you have to upgrade all companies. So the upgrade procedure is one huge database transaction, SQL transaction. So 300 companies times, I don't know how many thousand tables there are. That's a very impressive SQL transaction. So as far as I know, that's the main reason that we have to limit companies per environment. So if you need more than 300 companies, you need to run multiple environments. Now we get down to OData. OData is the 350 megabytes limit we had for general upload and download is also OData body size. You can have a maximum of 5 OData requests being executed at the same time. Otherwise, you get a 503 service temporary unavailable. I don't know. There might be more appropriate to send a 429, but that's a different discussion. Oh, we get a 429. So this one will wait in queue, and if the queue is exhausted, then you get a 50. So you never leave the queue. You get a 503. If the queue is above 100 connections in the queue, you get 429. Yeah. Another controversial setting is the maximum number of entities returned per OData request is 20,000. So if you're querying a lot of data, you get 20,000 records, and then you have to query again and using the skip token to skip ahead and then get the next 20,000 and so on in multiple calls. This is sometimes what gets people when they're just using straight HTTP connection to the OData endpoint and think, oh, all is good, until they need to get 21,000 records, and then they want to get 20 and don't know how to handle the skip token stuff. Like the Power BI connector and so on, the Power Platform connector for Business Central will do this right, of course, but if you just do HTTP calls, it's on you. If you do a batch operation, there's a maximum of 100 operations inside a single batch command. With a maximum number pending OData before request waiting to be processed is 95, and I guess that goes together with the 5 up here to be 100 in total. Rates, OData rates, that's also interesting. So in a sandbox, 300 requests per minute for sandbox, 600 requests per minute for a production environment. So this one sometimes also gets folks, and the problem with these limits is that they are per environment. So it doesn't matter if you are a 4-user Business Central or you are a 500-user Business Central. You get the same amount of requests. So I think these should be scalable by something. These should either be scalable by company or scalable by user. So we get more requests if we have more users. So this is weird. We have run into this in real life on environments, on customers with lots of users and lots of stuff going on, and websites and all sorts of things that are hitting this quite often. On OData, there's an 8-minute timeout. So if you're not completed within 8 minutes, you're cut off. So you need to be able to get the 20,000, whatever page you create. If there's a lot of data, you need to make sure that it's fast enough that it will give you the 20,000 records in less than 8 minutes. The maximum number of webhooks subscription. This one is also interesting / controversial, because if you have 300 companies, let's say you have 300 companies as the max, so the webhook is per company. So in reality, if you're in a lots of companies scenario, you cannot use webhooks because you run out of them before you have done anything. So if you just if you need a couple of webhooks per company, then you cannot have that many companies. So again, I think this one should be scalable by a different instead of just a hard-coded flat 200. We have run into situations where we had to do not the right thing. We had to be creative and then create a webhook table that was shared across companies, and then from each company, instead of triggering the right way, then we would trigger something put into this table, and then that table will have a webhook. And yeah. Anyway, I think this could be scalable in a better way. SOAP is pretty much the same as OData. There's a couple of gotchas on SOAP. 65 megabytes compared to the 350 up here. Otherwise, kind of the same. And now we're at the bottom. So I wanted to show one more thing because, hang on, we're already 22 minutes. Wow. So this is a website. And the cool thing about this is that all the documentation for Business Central is open source. And everything sits on GitHub. So in this case, you can see that we are in, we're in Dynamics 365 Business Central dev-IT pro-administration. So this repo called Dynamics 365 SMB-dev-IT pro-PB. That's the site. So I'm in the dev IT pro folder, and I'm in the administration folder. And if I go look here, where is it? Operational limits online. Here's the file. And the cool thing about this, and this is what I really like, is that you can go in and check the history. And see, hang on, Andre, one of the PMs at Microsoft on April. No, well, I think he just changed the name of a page here. So that perhaps not the most interesting edit there is. Updated operational limits for OData and Power Apps. So Kenny in December changed stuff. So you can follow along. You could even I find myself actually checking after each release if they change something, because I know that we at some point max number of webhook subscriptions. So this one actually got us. You see, March 22. The customer where we eventually ended up having to do some weird things. That project was started before at the end of 21 or something like that, and we were planning to use not thousands of webhooks, but a lot. And then we got hit by this. I think it's pretty cool that we actually, because it's just Git, so we have the source code for the documentation. We have the history, and if you really want to, you can actually say, hang on, this needs, let me compose a something that will help, so you can create a pull request to this repo, and then that goes into Microsoft, and if they like what you have written, they will add it to the documentation. I think that's pretty cool. That's the limits you have to live within. So after all this talking about non-development stuff, if you need a bit of AL hacking, I'm sure this video is filled with AL hacking. Go check it out. I'll see you there. Take care. Bye.